Sometimes moving to a new city or state can be scary, but we aren't alone.
Hey, this is Bethany B, and this is episode 36 of Welcome to the Wiregrass. Today, my guest is Aaron Gartlan. How are you today, Aaron?
I'm doing great, Bethany. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Your name is an easy one to remember because my brother's name is Aaron.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome.
Yes. So I always start off my interviews asking about the 411 just to kind of get to know you better. So tell me a little bit about yourself.
Bethany, I appreciate you having me on today. Always glad to come out and meet new people and talk with them about what we do day in and day out. Primarily represent the injured. Generally, that's good, hardworking people that have an injury while working. I'm married to Suzanne. We have 3 children, Carlton, Ashton, and Alexa Grace, and I've pretty much lived in Dothan or the Dothan area, pretty much my whole life.
Have you always wanted to stay in Dothan your whole life, or the Wiregrass area?
Bethany, for me, I really have. When we were talking earlier, something that came up was just, I guess, why. And for me, it's just always been about, when I thought about that, essentially the people that I love and care about have always been in this area, or at least most of the people. So that's kind of, I guess you could say, kept me here. It made me, as I was working through college and law school, the plan was to always come back and, have a law firm here in this area.
I do have to say, I've never felt so welcomed by a community before until I've moved to the Wiregrass area. Because before, like when I was in upstate New York or Michigan, I never really got too involved with the community until I moved here. And I wanted to get involved and meet everyone because everyone is so nice. The Southern charm is real here.
Yeah, absolutely. We represent over the years and have worked with so many soldiers over the years that are either currently stationed at Fort Rucker or in the Fort Rucker community, or people that had their families that had their last duty station at Fort Rucker and then retired and either came back to Dothan to retire or just felt, what you have just expressed, and so many people that we know, again, that have been stationed across the country or lived in different parts of the country. We hear that on a regular basis that, this is the kind of community they want to raise their children. They enjoy the school system, the safety, the infrastructure. We're close to the beach. We're close to Lake Eufaula and other lakes. So, it really is a nice family-oriented community.
Yeah, because in the north, people, they're not as nice as they are here. They're kind of more on like a one-track mind and don't get in their way and stuff like that. So you come here, and I was pleasantly surprised when people would like hold the door open for me, male and female. And I was just like, I'm not used to that. Usually like a door gets slammed in your face at least once a day when you're in the north, because people are just moving so fast and just trying to go through their day, let alone they're not really thinking about other people. And here in the South, people are always thinking about other people too. So I really appreciate that.
Well, I've had so many people, just so many close relationships and people that have impacted me. And I guess it just made the impression on me, early, even if I didn't realize it, that relationships and the people close to me are important. Mm-hmm. And again, I go back to what I said earlier. I think that has always been the attraction for me of this community.
And where did you go to college and law school?
So after graduating from Dothan High School, I actually began college at Wallace Community College. From there, I transferred to Troy University. And after completing my bachelor's degree at Troy University, I started law school at Jones Law School in Montgomery.
And what made you want to become a lawyer? Have you always wanted to be a lawyer when you were little?
Well, I think this kind of goes back to some of the relationships that we were talking about. Early on, I would say it was just a something that I was drawn to, interested in the law, whether it was movies, TV shows, just being out in the community. And then I think a combination of just wanting to get myself in a position to have, I mean, not to sound cliche, but it's honest, to have a better life. And then there were also some experiences that I had, and one of those, my dad grew up in Galax, West Virginia, which is a community where people either join the military or work at the furniture factory. There's furniture factories in that area. And so my dad wound up doing both, and then wound up getting into the Dothan, Daleville, Midland City area and worked at a brick plant, worked in a box factory. I can remember he and my mother talking about a man at the box factory that got his hand caught in a machine. Ooh. And it essentially chopped part of his hand off. And my dad took his shirt off, wrapped up his fingers, went to the emergency room with him. And I'll never forget that conversation. So then over in the community that we lived, there was a full service gas station there where the guys would still come out and check your windshield wipers, pump your fuel. And my dad, that's where he generally got fuel. And so the attendant, the manager there, had a prosthetic, a hook. Again, not with the technology and the advancements now. I mean, it was literally a metal hook. And my friends and I were scared of this guy. But even early at that point in life, I knew that he didn't suffer this, losing part of his arm on vacation. I had a sense that it was some type of work, even as a kid. So those experiences, it kind of just impressed me that work, factory work, industrial work can be dangerous. Well, then right after graduating high school, and this was probably the most significant factor in it, my dad suffered a heart attack. He had went to school and became a respiratory tech and was working with Breathing Care Associates, and actually suffered a heart attack sometime earlier during the day during a shift that he was on. And I got one of those phone calls. We say this all the time, but back before the cell phones, or at least before everybody had one, your family or whatever would kind of track you down at the home or wherever you were, home or office or whatever. So my mom didn't do that often. So I knew when the call came in, it was one of those calls, this is probably not good news. And my dad had suffered a heart attack. And again, apparently it started during his shift, but just being the kind of guy he was, he finished out, went home that night, and then just got to the point that he let one of his friends, a neighbor, know. They called the ambulance, and it was one of those things, the damage had already been done at that point, and he was not able to go back to work. So I saw emotionally and financially what that did to a man that had always taken pride in looking after, taking care of his family financially, doing the very best that he could for us. And I hate to say it, I took so much of that for granted back then. But now where I am in life, I've got so much appreciation through what him and other people that I grew up around, the kind of work. And so experiencing that, I felt like I wanted to help, but, what am I going to do? Again, I had just gotten out of high school, so that I was leaning in that direction. But that experience with my dad really put me in a position to say, okay, I'm making a commitment. I'm going to finish college. I'm going to law school. Ultimately, kind of what precipitated or led me to work with the injured.
I know you wanted to be like an injury law lawyer, but for other lawyers, how does that work? Like when you go to law school, obviously there's so many different types of lawyers out there. Do you tell them you're interested in studying injury law? Like, how does that all work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So really a big focus, Bethany, in law school, training you to think like a lawyer and have the background and the skill sets to be successful in a law firm or a law practice, but it's also designed to get you ready for the bar exam. Essentially, without being licensed by the state bar that you're going to be practicing, or there's opportunities to be licensed in multiple states, but essentially without that, you're not able to be a licensed attorney and practice and engage in the practice of law. A big focus in the curriculum that I was at, it's that formerly at that time it was the Thomas Good Jones School of Law. It was named after the founder. There are opportunities to focus in areas. So for me, I really focused in a concentration that would focus on litigation and trial work. So much of the curriculum was centered around getting us the foundation of subject knowledge so that we could determine what concentration that we wanted to go into and be ready for the bar exam. And just kind of a fun fact for you, when I sat for the Alabama bar exam in 1999, I finished the coursework for my law degree in August of 1999. At that time, it was offered twice a year. I think that's still the format. Fortunately, I passed the first time, but again, just to give you an idea of the seriousness of getting the students ready for the bar exam and also getting them ready to be lawyers and practice. But again, like I said, you can't get to that concentration without your law license, and you can't get that law license without getting through the bar exam. We had like a 35% pass rate, around 65% of students that have finished a 4-year bachelor's degree program, graduated high school, graduated a 4-year bachelor's, a 3-year, generally law school's a 3-year program, a 3-year curriculum, and then 65% that sat with, at the same time for the bar that I did back in February of 2000 didn't pass. So fortunately, I was, I was just determined going into it that I was only going to take it one time. I mean, I felt like just the stress and the pressure and just the financial need to just move forward with work. So I really went above and beyond in studying. I know that's a long answer, but yes, there are programs that will give you a concentration in certain areas, but it's also a balance. So generally, your first 1.5 to 2 years is going to be focused in those core foundational classes that are going to help get you ready for the bar exam. And then maybe you would have 1 year to 1.5 years of coursework that would be devoted to a concentration.
If you fail the bar, is there a limit of how many times you can take the bar exam?
It varies from state to state. And I guess another little piece of trivia for you, that one of the Kennedys that was an attorney, I don't remember 100% which state, maybe it was New York, but whatever state bar he was taking, I think he took it maybe 6 times.
Wow.
And that particular state had a limit at one time. It was changed. People kind of assumed it was changed so that he could take it again, and ultimately, I believe he did pass. But it varies from state to state.
Can't believe one of the Kennedys took him over 6 times. By that point, I'd be like, I don't know.
Yes.
Because that's a lot of studying you have to do for the bar exam, too. Because how long does it take you to study? Is it like months on end?
In Alabama, and I believe the format is still somewhat close to this, when I sat for the bar exam, there's 2 sections. One section was called the multi-state. Multi-state exam was given across the board in all 50 states 2 times a year. So that was one day. It was a 3-day test. The other 2 days were essay questions that Alabama lawyers, there's a panel, the Board of Bar Examiners, they would craft exam questions in the various subjects. And so it would be 2 days of essay testing. Wow. That was state specific. So there was some version of that with the multi-state applying in all 50 states. And then each state would handle 1 day or 2 days or some variation of that of essay. It's probably changed a little bit since that time. But again, it was only given twice a year. And I think that's still the format because that multi-state is kind of controlled. It's kind of like, it's not like the ACT, but it's somewhat like the ACT in that it's given at various locations across the country at certain times. And again, when I took it, it was twice. So if you didn't make it, you were going to have to wait 6 months to take it again. And now Kennedy may have gone into different states.
I actually wanted to be a lawyer when I was in high school because my aunt and uncle, they're both lawyers. I was like, that sounds like fun. Obviously a lot of work because I like arguing.
Yes.
But then I realized how much studying you have to do and how much school you would have to do. I was like, I don't know if I'm cut out for that. And I was never really good at taking tests in school either too. So I'm like, I don't know if I could handle that.
Well, and it's also too, I hear that so much, and arguing does play a really nice part in it, and it can help. You know, one of the things that I've stressed to people is, hey, listen, if we're in an argument, that could mean that we're like at the 2-minute warning and we're not winning the game.
Yeah.
Because if it comes down to, but again, I'm not discounting the arguing at all. But one of the things that I tell people, because I often hear from students and parents, because one of the other things that I've done since 2006, I've been a part of the adjunct faculty at the Sorrell College of Business at Troy Dothan. And so I've heard from a lot of students over the years that, or parents that, hey, my son or daughter loves to argue and they're great at arguing. I say, well, listen, that's wonderful, but there's so much more. There's just so much more to it than that, and that's a great skill to have. But and too, Bethany, I can tell you, and I think we've all experienced this. You know, if you spend a lot of time in arguments, it can also take a toll on you. It may be fun in the beginning, but on the surface it appears that's but
there's so much
it's
more.
so much more. Yes, before you can craft that argument, you've got to listen to and kind of have all the facts and details, because you don't want to kind of die on the hill, so to speak, of making a wonderful argument, and because you weren't listening or you didn't gather up all the facts and details, and then the air just gets let out of your argument and you lose. Oftentimes what the public perceives is not necessarily what's happening behind the scenes.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
It does, because it's like the movies that we see too, like A Few Good Men, saw that one, and then of course Legally Blonde, which, you know.
Well, and while I can't tell you that I haven't enjoyed those movies, and wow, Jack Nicholson, just brilliant.
He was so good
in that part. I mean, very believable. And there are moments like that in the courtroom. And Legally Blonde, yes. And I mean, who can't enjoy that movie? Really my favorite, though, probably my favorite lawyer movie. On the one hand, I've always been a big fan of, especially in Southeast Alabama, Gregory Peck, and of course, To Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, yep. It's a classic.
And not to discount Harper Lee's wonderful book. It's just a wonderful movie. In fact, Suzanne and I have a husky named Scout. Just for pure entertainment purposes, My Cousin Vinny is probably my favorite. And in every one of those movies, there's some truth in it, but I've really gotten to the point that I can't watch so many of the lawyer shows or movies because I just can't sit through it without saying, Suzanne, this is not really, that would never happen that way.
And they make being a lawyer look so easy, like Legally Blonde. They make it look like anyone could be a lawyer. And I'm like, that's not how it goes.
Well, and too, when you add that to all of these shows, and so often what so many of the various lawyer shows do, they'll have writers that have a legal background, and maybe they've pieced together 10 different cases. So it's just drama on steroids, so to speak, because it's not just one case they're pulling facts from. They're combining about 10 different cases. And then just some of the conferences where there's a client in and everybody's in at the conference table, and the client is just, giving everybody a piece of their mind. And I'm not going to sit here and say that there's not been meetings like that have taken place. But that's not generally the day-to-day. That's not the way that it's done. The other thing that I believe compounds the deal, where it makes it look and seem so easy, is the fact that so many of the lawyer advertisements have just gotten so far over the top. It just gives the public this perception that somebody fires a letter off or waives the threat of a lawsuit, and there's a huge verdict or settlement behind it, and that's just not reality.
No. When you get a case, I know that this answer will vary. How long on average do you usually work on that case?
So it really does vary depending on the injuries. An average case is going to be a 6 month to a year time frame. Again, and that just could vary depending on the seriousness of the injury. If there's a catastrophic or a kind of a life-altering injury and the case goes into litigation, it's somewhere in the range of a 1 to 2 year process.
And do you work on multiple cases at the same time?
Yes.
That'd be so exhausting and tiring. Do you ever confuse cases at all? If you're working on multiple at the same time?
Well, if you're not careful and you don't have the file or the person in front of you, so often if we see the face, of course, if we've got the file and we see, there's going to be no confusing with that. But sometimes that can happen if you're in a meeting and you're working on multiple files and you're going through. It can start because so many of the cases have similar fact patterns and similar injuries, and so it can run together. But that's one of the nice things about technology. We're just able to to keep more information and keep things on track and keep us together, and also just working as a team. I, work with a network of attorneys and also have a really strong paralegal client advocate, Candace Jimenez, and she is constantly staying in touch with everybody.
We kind of spoke about this, but describe the day-to-day life of being a lawyer.
So for me, that has varied, and I would say earlier in my career, so much of it centered around being in the courthouse at hearings and trials and various stages and so forth. It's a lot of phone calls, a lot of meetings, other attorneys, really spend a lot of time focusing on the cases and the clients that we take in. I spend more time now with, again, just making those initial decisions about, what cases we're going to move forward with, what cases we're going to steer over to or refer. Again, if it's something outside of injury law that we're going to refer to someone else. And also just going out in the community to talk to people, because that's, and meeting people, it's something I found being in Southeast Alabama, just that work ethic that people have. Most people have reservations about going to see an attorney, even if they really need it, even if they're at a pivotal, potentially life-altering stage in life and they need an attorney. So many people are reluctant. So that's one of the areas that I've felt I'm needed in, is to be out in the community as much as I can, meeting with people. With a lot of our clients, that's ensuring they're getting the best medical treatment and care that's available to them. Oftentimes that's addressing unsafe conditions and practices, unnecessary risk and danger. A great case helps a family pick up the pieces. The best cases, again, when we're at our best, they touch, transform, and change lives and policies, again, expose unnecessary risk and danger, and those that would place a greater value on profits and productivity at the expense of safety and human life. And just a quick example, we hear a lot about Juul. The founders of Juul went out to make smoking young, hip, and cool again. They patented a nicotine salt formula that literally goes down cool. And the significance of that is that a child can pick up a pod, one of the pods that you put into the little device, and one of those pods, and the brilliance is they've got they've even got a formula that's a nice mint flavor, and other flavors it's half the nicotine.
Yeah.
So you look at it, wow, this is half the nicotine, but that nicotine salt formula that goes down cooler without the gag reflux aftertaste of a traditional cigarette. So literally a child on day one of vaping on the Juul can take down a pod which contains as much nicotine as 2 packs of Marlboro cigarettes. They also went down, the founders, in an effort to make it young, hip, and cool again, they went down to a library that had chronicled every print ad that the tobacco industry ever ran. So they pulled the ads that worked and updated them with younger, hipper, cooler children. And you can go look. I mean, you don't have to take my word for it. Just go search, do a search, and I certainly don't believe everything on the internet, but this is one thing you could believe. Go look at the Instagram marketing, the Facebook marketing, the social media marketing. Maybe these were adults that were paid for their work in these ads, but they're made up to look like children in activities that children, and they modeled the ads that the tobacco industry that were successful for the tobacco industry years ago when the tobacco industry was targeting children. Why? Because if we can get them before 12, if we can get them to try our product before 12, chances are they're going to do it the rest of their life.
It's true.
And I can speak from, again, back to my father from experience. He started smoking when he was about 10 years old and did until the day he died. That's profits and productivity at the expense. I mean, when you market this poison to children, you're putting profits over people. And so that's one example.
And what has been your toughest case, and what has been the most rewarding case?
Well, the toughest would be also the most rewarding. John Randall Crawford and Red Rabin. And Red was actually one of my very best friends, the best man in mine and Suzanne's wedding. To go to John first, just to give you a quick overview, got a couple of phone calls. He was called in to do some welding and maintenance work. You know, John was a tough, hard-working father, brother, protector. He got over to this industrial plant to do his work faithfully, you know, that he had been called on to do after already putting in a tough shift that day. And when he got down in the machinery to do the work, somebody decided they needed to turn a machine off. When they did, a gate closed and crushed John, and John didn't make it home. To briefly talk about Red, tough, hardworking, like John, would leave home sometimes 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, work all day into the night at times, whatever had to be done to get the job done to provide for the family. And he was doing, Red had a business that he did a lot of work with independent service and fuel stations, working on LED and installing and servicing LED signage. And he was doing some work at a service station in a bucket lift. It was supposed to go down. Instead, it went up and pinned him into a canopy. And there, too, like John, didn't get to make it home to his family. Those families, those two stories, those two families, that's the heart of, the epitome of what we do day in and day out. There's literally not a day that goes by that I don't think about John. I don't think about Red. I don't one or the other, or both of them, or their family. And so it's just a part of a commitment that I've made that I would, always talk about them, honor their legacy, during difficult times, difficult cases. I step back and I think about how hard my dad worked to provide for me. I'll be honest, I'm not proud of it, but as a kid, I took that for granted. I think about how hard the people in that community to work to provide for their families, and wow, and then moving forward, I think about John getting up in the middle of the night to go do welding work and actually working in that setting with that machinery. I think about Red getting on the road to, again, sometimes 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, because he had to travel to get to where he was going, get people the help to take care of his family, to take care of his business. Never complained about it, was always happy to do it, and was successful. I mean, he overcame pretty much every obstacle that you could think of to become a successful husband, father, businessman. I can't stress enough that how much John and Red and their families mean to me.
That's so tough. I remember when I was in Michigan, one of my old jobs, it was under construction, and there's this one guy who, I think like a piece of wood or something fell and hit him, and he passed away on the job. And it was just tough because he was a working man, and he actually was putting in overtime, and he was a family man. And it's just so tough that these guys are just going to work, going about their normal life, and then you never think that they're not going to make it back home to see their husbands, wives, their children. So it's just such a tough thing to deal with.
It's so easy to blame the weak. It's easy to blame the dead. And one of the things that we hear so often, and a family hears immediately or shortly after this type of tragedy, operator error. Yeah. Operator error. So oftentimes the last thing that a family wants to do is go see an attorney, because they don't, they often think, well, they've told me it was something that he did. And I can assure you that's generally not the case. These hardworking men and women, their reputation oftentimes is tied into their work rate.
Obviously, being a lawyer, you're involved in the community quite a bit, but how else are you involved with the community?
Out at Troy University in the Sorrell College of Business, that's one of the primary areas. And, we hear so much negativity about young people and the students of today, but I can tell you there's some phenomenal students that go through that business college. working people, family people, military, just students from all walks of life, students that have been in this area all their life and they're coming in right out of high school and they're interested in getting in the family business or starting a business of their own. Really are top-notch students in that program, along with the staff and the faculty on the adjunct faculty there since 2006. So that would be, one of the primary. The other areas, I'm on the advisory board of the Catholic Social Services in Dothan. I'm also on the advisory board of the Dothan Technology Center, and there's some wonderful students in that program. And along with that, I've been fortunate to go over to Dothan High multiple times and speak to primarily the ROTC cadets. I know the Dothan City Schools have been restructured. I can't seem to get accustomed to calling it the Preparatory Academy or whatever. I mean, to me, it's Dothan High and Northview. But again, over the years, I've had some wonderful opportunities to go over and spend time with the ROTC cadets and the students at the Dothan Technology Center, and do the great work they're doing over there. Also, part of some groups that get together and meet through our membership at the Dothan Area Chamber of Commerce, and a group, the Dothan Networking Alliance, and then also a group that meets through the Enterprise Area Chamber of Commerce. And all those groups give me the opportunity to just go out and meet business owners and business executives out in the community and learn from them and get to know them. And we, really form some, again, back to where I started, relationships. There's so many just top-notch business owners in this community that have built their businesses with their clients, with their customers in mind, and build and set up a culture inside that business to work for their customers and to do the best for them. It's really incredible, the business community in this area.
And there's so many new businesses forming all the time now, too, which is awesome.
Yes. And I think where we are with the economy now, and also I think technology continuing to grow and expand and become more affordable, it's really helping to level the playing field for our local businesses. And one of the things that something you're interested in from a business standpoint, the technology really allows a small business, especially small compared to, when we start looking at national brands and national chains and national companies and businesses, it allows a local business to provide a niche concierge type service and experience to provide those boutique niche concierge white glove, whatever you call it, experiences in a niche and really outperform the bigger national businesses and companies, again, in that niche. That is something that really strive to do, is to focus in essentially one area and devote all of the time and all of the attention to that, to provide that level of service. And again, it's something that we're constantly working to improve, and we've got a long way to go.
I agree. And one last question: when you're not at the office or in the courtroom, what do you do in your spare time? What do you do for fun?
Well, for me, I've always enjoyed work and being at the office and, learning and meeting new people. So, again, that's one area. I've also pretty much since the movie, since I first saw the very first Rocky, I've enjoyed exercising and working out. So that's something I enjoy doing. And really just basic spending time with Suzanne and Carlton, Alexa Grace, Ashton, and our friends, our family, having dinner, cookouts, going to the beach, going to the lake. It honestly, one of the things I tell Suzanne so often is it just really doesn't take much to make me happy.
Yeah.
And I'm really content so often to be at home. Sometimes I enjoy concerts, documentaries, reading, movies, just pretty much basic things, but it centers around spending time with friends and family. The best parts of my life. I mean, I just, when I think about it, it's incredible.
Well, that's all the questions I have, unless there's anything else you wanted to add.
I can't really think of anything right now. I think we've covered a lot of ground, like I said, unless you want me to dig out some more of those profits over people.
If you want to.
But I know at some point.
We're going to have you get back on, too.
I know at some point.
Thank you for joining me today.
Yes, I'm glad to be here.
There's a brand new podcast called Moms Getting Real in the Wiregrass with Anita and Jeannie. They are two moms living in the Wiregrass area, and they are going to tell you exactly like it is. They're not sugarcoating anything. Of course, they will tell you some of the sweet stories of their little ones, but they're going to tell you how hard it is to be a mom as well. And of course, if you are a mom, you already know how hard it is, so you can definitely relate to this. You can listen for free at Google Play Store or Apple Podcasts, and of course, at WKMX.com. Tune in next week. I'll be interviewing Jeannie Broadway, who's originally from Virginia.
If you'd like to be featured on my podcast, send me an email, Bethany@trpdothan.com. Thank you for listening to episode 36. Welcome to the Wiregrass. Brought to you by the Radio People.